Hey there, how's it going? My name's Bruce, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made this modern looking cabinet. It is really hot here in the summer. We live in Mississippi and it's quite unbearable during the summer months. We have a ceiling fan, but we're in the process of just trying to make our back porch more beautiful so that we want to spend more time out here. We want to see the kids play in the back. Some of that involves just tidying up stuff and making it look good. Some of it involves being more comfortable. So New Air reached out to me. They have a high velocity fan that's actually cool because it has a floor stand or it can be mounted on a wall, and asked if I would like to try it out. So I did, and we've been using it. We mounted it here on one of our columns on the back porch. Well, it has totally transformed us being out here, because when we swivel it over to our seating area, we actually have a little bit of a breeze and it makes it very bearable to be out here. I've got links to this fan down below if you want to check it out. It has been a really nice one. Some of the things I like about it are that you can leave it plugged in, so it has a pull switch, and then it's pretty quiet. It has 3 speeds. Check the links out below to that fan, and let me show you how I made this cabinet. To start off, I went over to my scrap pile to see what I had there. I was able to find all of the material for this build in my scraps. I won't go into every detail, but I milled up the material for the carcass first. Pieces for the carcass cut. These are going to be our 2 outside pieces. We've got our top and bottom, which will be inset here like that. And our shelf piece is actually going to be dadoed, so it's slightly longer because it's going to inset into that piece there. So looking pretty good. I used my dado stack to cut the shelf dado. Then, I did a little bit of sanding before assembly. I'm just using glue and some brad nails, and this should be plenty strong, especially for what this cabinet will be holding. For the back of the cabinet, I had a piece of 1/2 inch plywood left over from another project, and it was going to work perfectly for this one. I used 2 pieces but made them overlap on the shelf so you can't tell it's 2 pieces. I've got a flush trim bit in the router here. I'm going to get it set, and I purposefully put the back on here a little bit longer. That way I could just trim it flush. It would look nice that way, and I didn't have to be quite as precise. So I'm just gonna set this to where it'll ride against my cabinet on this bearing, and I'll trim it flush. Now, I'm moving on to the cabinet doors. I found some more 3/4 inch plywood and cut the pieces down to size on the table saw. Got a couple of scraps here. These are our doors, but we want a continuous thing across the front of the doors. We don't want them to keep moving, so I'm going to just pop a scrap into my workbench here on a couple of sides. That way everything will stay put. And now we can kind of push against this. When we're done, we'll just pop that up. My wife was available to help me out with some of this project, so we had fun kind of coming up with this geometric design on the fly. She even got into the nail gun action. This little pin nailer is kind of fun to use. Doesn't have a little weight.
So it's not like your other one you have to push down?
Like I mentioned, we just made the design as we went. We would rip another strip of 1/4-inch plywood to a different width, make that go as far as it would, rip another one a different width, and repeat. After a while, it really started to look cool. For some of the pieces, I would trim them at the bandsaw just to save material. We weren't sure we could get all that we needed from the 1/4-inch material that I had on hand. I used the ruler parts from my combination squares as spacers in between the different parts. When I do this again, I'll make some wood scraps as spacers because even though we were careful with wiping off the glue from the rulers, enough glue residue stayed on them that they've developed some surface rust since then. That's not great.
I'm gonna eyeball Rashawn.
Enough. Stop messing around. We're keeping that one, right?
Yeah.
What happens with 3 kids at home? What? Is that out loud?
Yes.
Ooh, what a good fit.
Very nice.
You gross.
Oh, it's time to be done with this. Let's get her done.
Finish it up.
That looks good.
I thought that was it. When I was trimming these sides flush with the router, I had to use a piece of the same material clamped to the end since it would eventually be wrapped all the way around it. That way, it would trim it to the exact size needed. Let's talk about filling nail holes for a minute. I've used this method in the past of using drywall, and I've seen and talked to many other woodworkers that use it to fill gaps and holes. I had some issue with it this time though. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the video. Next, I needed to rip this exactly down the middle so it would become 2 cabinet doors again. When we were nailing on the geometric pattern, we were careful not to get nails where we would be cutting it apart. After sanding all of the boards and prepping the surface, I took everything outside to spray some paint on them. If you're interested in this sprayer, I've got a link to it and all of the tools I used in the description below. And this is where I started to notice that something was not right. While the paint was drying, I moved on to making the door pulls. I wanted to keep with the really modern look of this cabinet, and I found a nice curly piece of maple to use. I cut some angles into each side, sanded it, and then cut the piece into 2 separate pulls. I made this up as I went, just moving to the next step as I saw the shape appear that I liked. I finished them with some spray lacquer to bring out the curl in the maple's grain. I think the raw wood look is a nice contrast to the blue cabinet. Next up was drilling out the holes for the full overlay hinges I had. This jig I had made this really easy, except where I measured was based on the hinges instructions, which was for material that was 3/4 inch thick. Our case sides were 1 inch thick because of the added geometric pattern that we put on with the 1/4 inch plywood. Because of this, the hinges didn't work properly where I drilled them. More on that later. Remember how I mentioned that I started to get suspicious about the drywall compound and the paint earlier? Well, I had to do a full redo. This is what the cabinet looked like after hours of meticulous scraping and sanding, removing some paint that never fully set up. I didn't get more footage of me removing the paint because I was probably spitting nails at the moment. When I returned the paint to the store, they were going to look into it to see if it was a bad batch. I know something wasn't right. Some of it might have been the drywall compound, but something about the paint was off too. Even when I was spraying it, it was clumpy and not spraying properly. And I've used that sprayer a lot at this point, so I know what to expect. Well, when I got a new can of paint, I also got a new color. After seeing the other color for a few days, we decided it was just a bit too light. We picked the next color darker on the same swatch since we were having to swap it out anyway. This one was totally different. It sprayed like it should and looked immediately better. I just gave everything a really light coat and let it dry for a full day or more in between this time. So this project ended up taking a full week longer than it should have, but it looks good now. So about the hinges, I ended up just having to go back and create my own jig since the jig that I had did not go to the depth that I needed, seeing as how the cabinet sides were thicker than the hinges recommended. It ended up working okay, but the holes that I had previously drilled for the hinges were just a little bit elongated. Okay. Now that we've got the tape off, we can put this handle back on here. We've already pre-drilled the hole, so it should just go right back in the same hole. Should. Going in, is it straight, you think?
Yeah.
It's a nice pull.
Let's get the other one done.
All right. We picked up these Undermount hooks because we wanted to be able to hang some stuff from the underside of the cabinet. As I mentioned in the intro, this cabinet is part of us trying to make this space on our back patio one that is more inviting and more comfortable. This cabinet helps us organize all kinds of things that previously just set out in view. This nice, clean looking cabinet now makes being on the back patio even that much more enjoyable. I decided to just screw straight into our lap siding. I got one side secured and then used a level to make sure the other side was perfect. In total, I used 4 screws and this cabinet was very secure.
Sweet words of encouragement.
Pretty level. Thanks, bud. How does it look?
Good.
I gotta do one more screw.
But I wanted it to go over there.
You did? We'll have to do something else over there.
It does look good.
My wife touched up a little bit of paint where the screws went so you can barely even see them. All that was left was to load up the cabinet with some of our goodies like bug spray, sunscreen, wasp spray, gardening gloves, and pruners. That way we can just open this cabinet, grab what we need, and keep everything organized when we're done with it. Cheers. Cheers. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I really like how this cabinet turned out. These geometric lines and stuff ended up looking really cool. I was able to use some scrap plywood to just dress this up, and really the whole thing was built out of scrap. I wanted this to have a seamless transition between the two doors, so I actually built it in one piece and then cut it apart. Well, that blade kerf ended up being too wide and I wanted the doors closer together, so that's why these are slightly not lined up. And I would love to know your ideas of how to do that differently so that they line up perfectly when the finished product is done. All of the tools that I used in this build will be linked down below. It really helps my channel if you click those links, those Amazon links. I'm an affiliate of theirs. If you click those and go shop for anything and purchase within 24 hours, I get credit for that and it costs you nothing. So thank you if you've been doing that, and consider clicking some of those links next time you go shopping. I really appreciate you watching. If you think I earned it, definitely give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. I've got a bunch more videos coming, and I think you're gonna like them. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next video.